So let's cut up an onion. First thing that I like to do is cut off the end, and I'm going to leave the root end attached, and then I'm going to cut it in half. And now I'm going to cut through quite close together. This is to get a fine dice, and then use the flat of your hand so that you can't cut yourself, and make a sideways cut. And the bigger the onion, the more that you're going to need to do this. And now, again, this is your guide. If you cut like this, you can cut your fingers, but if you use the flat blade of the knife against the edge of your fingers, you won't cut yourself. And just cut fine dice like this. And by leaving that root end attached, it makes the onion hold together, so it makes it much easier to cut. And then when you come down to this very last little bit, you just have to improvise a bit. So many dishes start with sautéing an onion, and what you're wanting to do here is you're just wanting to cook the onion until it's transparent or clear rather than browning it. And when an onion's raw, it's really acrid, and as you cook it, the longer you cook it, the sweeter it becomes. The other thing that's interesting about onions is that they belong to the same family as shallots, garlic and leeks. They're all alliums. So they all share this characteristic of getting sweeter as they cook. And sometimes when I've got a big crop of onions and they're not going to keep, for example in the garden just recently, the onions had started to rot at the bottom, so I needed to cook them all now, and I'll cook them off like this and then I just freeze them. It's already done, and it just means I can pull it out and I'm ready to start carrying on cooking with whatever dish I'm making, whether it's a sauce for pasta or a sauce for a stew, or so many ways, curries, stir fries, that you're going to use these onions. So it seems like such a basic thing, but really getting this right is the beginning to so many dishes. And if you were cooking a lot of Indian dishes, you'd fry these onions in more oil until they were really crispy. But I like to start just with this process where the onions are just gently cooked until they're softened out. It'll take about 8 to 10 minutes. Right, let's cut some garlic up. So the best way to get the skin off the garlic is to cut the end off and then use the palm of your hand, and that means that the skin will just peel off really nicely. Now you can cut garlic several ways. Either cut it very thinly like this, so you want to use the flat edge of your hand to thinly slice it. Now, if you want to take it finer than this, say for example if you're making a salad dressing or something like that, what you'll find is you don't want to get big chunks of garlic. So what I like to do is make a garlic paste. So once I've roughly chopped the garlic, I just add a sprinkle of salt, and then I work that through. And because the salt is gritty, what it's going to do is it will make it into a paste really easily. So just use the flat blade of your knife, and you're using this sort of pressing motion, so the tip of the blade is actually cutting the front edge of the garlic. A very smooth garlic taste all the way through the dish, rather than having sort of chunks of garlic here and there. So now that's ready to use in a salad dressing, or if you've sauteed some onions, you can pop it in there. So if I want to have slices of garlic, I'm going to cut the end off the garlic, and then I'm going to cut the whole clove in half so that I can get the skin off. Because if I bash it, then I'm going to crush the garlic inside and I won't get nice neat slices. So just take the skin off. That's actually often the messiest part of the whole thing. So now I'm just going to slice the garlic thinly, and I'm using the flat blade of the knife against the edge of my fingers. So I'm never cutting like that, I'm always cutting like this, and that allows me to gauge how thickly I'm slicing it. So this is nice if you want little fried garlic slices as a garnish to a dish, or if you're cooking prawns or something like that. It's often nice having the garlic in thin slices. So now I thought we'd put that garlic into my cooked onions. So you can see the onions are starting to come clear, and that is where I want them to be before I add the garlic. If you put the garlic in too early, it's very easy to burn it. So I'm going to add the sliced garlic into this, and I'm going to save the crushed garlic that I've made for a salad dressing. So many dishes start with this really simple idea. Cook some onions, add some garlic. If we want to make a simple sugo, we're going to add some tomato paste, crushed or canned tomatoes, and a little bit of seasoning, salt, pepper, and maybe a pinch of sugar. And that gives me a really lovely basic tomato sauce that you can take in so many ways. Okay, so I'm going to make a sugo. Got my sauteed onions and my garlic, and I'm going to add a couple of anchovies. So these are just really yummy canned anchovies, and I'm just going to dice them and add them into the sauce. And what they're going to do is add a whole layer of umami, that lovely depth of flavour. It's not going to taste fishy or of anchovies. It's just a fantastic ingredient to add. Don't have to do this, but it gives you, to my mind, the best tomato sauce. As these cook, they'll start to get pasty and break down, and that's what you want. You just want them to kind of melt into the sauce. Some tomato paste. I always add the tomato paste now. I want to fry it off, and that way it takes out that slightly metallic flavour that you sometimes get with tomato paste. So just cooking it out now before you add any liquid avoids that problem. So now it's starting to smell really good, and that's often what you're looking for when you're cooking. You're using all your senses, so it's that aromatic smell of the onions and the anchovies and the garlic and the tomato. So I'm ready to add some liquid. I'm going to add a couple of cans of tomatoes, maybe just one, we'll see. Turn that down, and there's going to be a little salt in the anchovies, so won't need very much salt. I'll just put a pinch of salt in now, and some pepper and a pinch of sugar. About half a teaspoon of sugar, and that's just going to again round out that tomato flavour. I'm going to let that cook for about 10 or 15 minutes, then it'll get nice and reduced, and then we're going to toss it through pasta. So simple. Woohoo! So my pasta water is boiling, and I want it nice and salty. It should taste like the sea. So I'm going to use, like in a big pot like this, a heaped tablespoon of salt. And then just drop the pasta in. You don't need any oil or anything else. I've got gluten-free pasta here, and I'm just going to cook it for 8 to 10 minutes, but any kind of pasta would be absolutely fine. So cook it for the least amount that it says on the packet directions, and check it, because there's nothing worse than overcooked pasta. Timer on. So the pasta sauce is cooked right down, and the pasta has just got about 30 seconds to go. So I'm going to scoop out some of the water, because if you look closely, I've reduced the sauce right down. It's quite pasty. That way it's going to have a really intense flavour, and I can loosen it with some of this pasta water. So just checking my pasta. It's perfect. So we'll drain it. And just toss this in the sauce. And what I'm really looking for, can you see how the pasta's taking on the colour of the sauce here? So it's not too much sauce around, but it's just soaking into the pasta. Dinner for two. Let's have a taste. Now, if you wanted to make this vegan, you could leave the anchovy out and you could put some capers in, cook them out as you did with the anchovy. You could also make this sauce, and instead of the anchovy, you could put some diced halloumi in there and some spinach and toss it through the pasta. So you can take the sauce in so many different directions. It's really good.